The phone shattered the silence at 3:52 a.m. Minjay's hand shot out in the darkness, muscle memory from years of middle-of-the-night emergencies. His fingers closed around the device before his eyes fully opened. The screen's harsh glow illuminated his face as he registered the unknown number. Kang Min-jae? The voice was clipped, professional, urgent. Speaking. This is Mount Sinai Hospital. Your wife, Arielle Brooks, has been admitted. She's in active labor with complications. The baby's heart rate is dropping. We need you here immediately. The words hit him like bullets. Wife. Baby. Complications. Minjay was already moving, throwing off silk sheets, his bare feet hitting the cold marble floor. I'm on my way. He ended the call and stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds. Arielle. 8 months since he'd last seen her face. 8 months since she'd walked out of his life without explanation, leaving only a note that said she couldn't do this anymore. 8 months of wondering where she was, if she was safe, if she ever thought about him the way he thought about her every single day. And she'd been pregnant. With his child. Minjay grabbed his clothes from the chair, pulling on pants and a shirt with shaking hands he couldn't quite control. His security detail would be asleep in the adjacent penthouse suite, but there was no time. Every second mattered. He snatched his keys and wallet, not bothering with his jacket, and headed for the private elevator. The city streets were empty at this hour, just the occasional taxi and late-night wanderers. Minjay pushed his Aston Martin faster than he should have, weaving through traffic lights, his mind a chaotic mess of fear and memory. He couldn't lose her. Not like this. Not before he could tell her everything he should have said before. The hospital's emergency entrance blazed with fluorescent light. Minjay abandoned his car at the curb and ran inside, his expensive Italian shoes echoing on the linoleum. Arielle Brooks, he said to the woman at the desk, his voice harder than he intended. Where is she? The nurse looked up, startled by his intensity. Are you family? I'm her husband. She hesitated, fingers hovering over her keyboard. Labor and delivery, 4th floor. But sir, she's in surgery. Minjay was already moving toward the elevators. The 4th floor was quieter, painted in soft blues, and pinks meant to be calming. A nurse intercepted him at the surgical wing doors. Sir, you can't go back there. If you're family, you'll need to wait in. Where is she? Minjay's voice dropped to something dangerous, the tone that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Where is Arielle Brooks? The nurse's eyes widened, but before she could respond, a doctor emerged through the double doors, pulling off surgical gloves. Mr. Kang? That's me. I'm Dr. Patricia Chen. Your wife is in surgery right now. Emergency C-section. The baby was in distress, and we couldn't wait. But I need you to know, Arielle came in alone, and she's been through a difficult labor. The next hour is critical for both of them. Minjay felt his chest constrict. Can I see her? Not yet. But as soon as she's stable, you'll be the first to know. There's a waiting room down the hall. It shouldn't be long. Shouldn't be long. The words echoed in Minjay's head as he forced himself to walk to the waiting room. Shouldn't be long could mean anything. It could mean everything was fine, or it could mean they were preparing him for the worst. He sank into an uncomfortable plastic chair and dropped his head into his hands. For the first time in a decade, Kang Min-jae, the man who controlled half of New York's underground economy, who had politicians and police captains on his payroll, who could make people disappear with a phone call, felt completely powerless. 3 years earlier, he never would have imagined this moment. Never would have believed that a woman spilling whiskey on his shoes would lead to him sitting in a hospital at 4 a.m, praying to a God he didn't believe in. But that's exactly what had happened. It was a Tuesday night at the Jade Orchid Lounge, one of the high-end establishments Minjay used for business meetings, that needed to look like casual drinks. He'd been sitting in a private booth with 2 associates, discussing a shipping route problem when she appeared. The cocktail server moved through the crowd with practiced efficiency, balancing a tray of drinks that probably cost more than most people's weekly salary. She wore the standard uniform, black dress, crisp white apron, but there was something about the way she carried herself. Confident without being arrogant, present without being intrusive. She was heading toward their booth when someone stumbled into her path. The tray tilted. She tried to correct, but physics won. Whiskey splashed across Minjay's custom-made shoes and the hem of his pants. The entire booth went silent. His associates froze. Everyone in the immediate vicinity stopped talking. The server's eyes went wide with horror. "Oh my God, I am so sorry. Someone bumped me, and She grabbed napkins from her apron, dropping to her knees to try to blot the liquid. "Please, I'll pay for the cleaning. Stop," Minjay said quietly. She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw her face clearly. Brown skin that seemed to glow in the lounge's amber lighting. Dark eyes that held genuine remorse, but not fear. Full lips pressed into a worried line. Most people who accidentally crossed Minjay responded with terror. They knew who he was, or they could sense the danger he represented. They groveled and begged and made excuses. She just looked at him steadily and said, "I really am sorry. It was an accident, but that doesn't make it okay. Tell me how I can make this right." Minjay studied her for a long moment. "What's your name?" "Arielle. Arielle Brooks." "Well, Arielle Brooks, accidents happen. Forget about it." She blinked, clearly surprised. "Are you sure? Those shoes look expensive." "They are." Minjay reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Not the one with Horizon Group's logo and his executive title, but the plain black one with just a phone number embossed in silver. He held it out to her. "Call me if you ever need anything." Arielle took the card slowly, confusion crossing her features. "I don't understand." "You don't have to." Minjay gestured for his associates to resume their conversation. "That's all." She stood, still holding the card like it might explode, and backed away before turning to disappear into the crowd. Minjay's second in command, David, leaned in. "Boss, you want me to—" "No," Minjay cut him off. "Leave her alone." He didn't expect her to call. Most people threw the card away, or kept it as a strange souvenir. But 2 weeks later, his private line rang with an unknown number. "Hello?" Her voice was uncertain. "Arielle Brooks," Minjay said, recognizing her immediately. "I was wondering if you'd reach out." Okay, this is going to sound crazy, but I got a call from someone at Horizon Group. They said I was being considered for a position, and they gave me this address for an interview. And when I looked up the company, I saw your name, and—" She took a breath. "Did you have something to do with that?" Minjay leaned back in his office chair, a small smile playing at his lips. "I might have." "Why?" "Because you were honest when you could have lied. Because you were calm when you could have panicked. Because I need someone with those qualities." He paused. "Come to the interview. Hear what we have to offer. If you don't like it, walk away. No strings attached." There was a long silence. "What kind of company is this, really?" "The kind that values discretion and intelligence. Come see for yourself." She came. Minjay watched from his office window as she entered the building, wearing a simple navy dress and carrying herself with that same quiet confidence. He'd had his HR director conduct the initial interview, wanting to see how she handled herself without his presence. The report came back glowing. Smart. Quick learner. Unintimidated by authority but respectful. Clean background. No red flags except that she seemed almost too good to be true. Minjay met with her himself the following day. "Miss Brooks," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his massive desk. "Thank you for coming back." Arielle sat, her hands folded in her lap. "I've done some research on Horizon Group since yesterday." "And what did you find?" "Legitimate business operations in import-export, real estate development, and private security. Impressive portfolio. But there are gaps in the information. Things that don't quite add up." Her eyes met his. "You want to tell me what this is really about?" Minjay appreciated her directness. "I need an executive aide, someone to manage my schedule, handle sensitive communications, coordinate with various business partners. The pay is substantial, triple what you're making now between both your jobs. The hours are demanding. The work requires absolute confidence, and there are aspects of my business dealings you'll see that might make you uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable how?" "I operate in gray areas, Miss Brooks. I'm not going to lie to you about that. But if you work for me, you'll never be asked to do anything illegal yourself. Your job is administrative support. Nothing more." Arielle studied him for a long moment. "Why me?" "Instinct." Minjay stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. "I've learned to trust my instincts about people. Something tells me you're someone I can rely on. And if I say no? Then you walk out of here, and we never speak again. No consequences, no pressure." He could feel her weighing the decision. The practical part of her brain was probably screaming warnings, telling her to run. But the part that had struggled to make ends meet, that had worked 2 jobs and still worried about rent, that wanted something more from life, that part was tempted. "I'll need time to think about it," she finally said. "You have 24 hours, she called back in 12. "I'll take the job, but I need ground rules. Name them. No lying to me about what I'm walking into. No putting me in danger without warning. And the second I feel like this crosses a line I can't live with, I'm out. No questions asked." "Agreed," Minjay said. "Welcome to Horizon Group, Miss Brooks." The first month was exactly what he'd described. Arielle managed his calendar with frightening efficiency, coordinated meetings, handled correspondence. She learned quickly which calls to put through immediately and which could wait. She figured out how to read his moods, when to push back on his decisions, and when to simply execute orders. She also started to see the reality of his world, the meetings where men spoke in careful euphemisms about shipments and territory and problems that needed solving. The late-night phone calls about situations that required his immediate attention, the way people deferred to him with a mixture of respect and fear. But she also saw the contradictions, the way he quietly paid for the hospital bills of an employee's sick child, the violence he prevented with carefully chosen words instead of action, the genuine loyalty he inspired in people who'd worked for him for years. "You're not what I expected," Arielle told him one night when they were working late, reviewing contracts for a new real estate acquisition. Minjay looked up from the documents. "What did you expect?" "Someone crueler, I think. More obviously dangerous." "I am dangerous, Miss Brooks. Don't mistake calculated restraint for softness." "I don't." She met his gaze. "But I've seen you choose mercy when violence would have been easier. That counts for something." "Does it?" Minjay set down his pen. "In my world, mercy is often seen as weakness." "Then maybe you're in the wrong world." The words hung between them, charged with something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. It was 3 months into her employment when the attraction became undeniable. They were working late again, as had become their routine. Minjay's office was quiet, except for the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers and the click of Arielle's keyboard. She was concentrating on an email, her lower lip caught between her teeth in a way that Minjay had noticed she did when she was thinking hard. "Arielle," he said quietly. She looked up. "Yes." "You should go home. It's late." "You're still here. I live here." She smiled slightly. "The penthouse upstairs, I remember." She saved her document and closed her laptop. Can I ask you something before I go? Always. Why did you really hire me? And don't say instinct. I want the truth. Minjay stood and walked around his desk, leaning against it. Because when you looked at me that night in the lounge, you saw a person. Not a reputation, not a monster, just a man who'd had whiskey spilled on his shoes. He paused. That's rare in my life. Arielle stood too, gathering her things. You're just a man, Minjay. A complicated one, but still human. She'd started using his first name weeks ago, dropping the formal Mr. Kang without either of them really discussing it. Now, in the quiet intimacy of his office, it felt weighted with significance. Sometimes I'm not sure about that, he said softly. I am. Arielle moved closer, and Minjay could smell her perfume, something subtle and warm. I've seen enough to know. What have you seen? Someone who carries the weight of too many responsibilities. Someone who chose power because he thought it would keep him safe, but now realizes it's just another kind of prison. Her eyes searched his face. Someone who's lonely. Minjay felt something crack open in his chest. Arielle. I should go, she said quickly, as if suddenly aware of how close they were standing. I'll see you tomorrow. She left before he could respond, and Minjay stood alone in his office, wondering when exactly he'd started falling for his executive aide. The incident happened 2 weeks later. Minjay was meeting with a potential business partner who turned out to be less interested in partnership and more interested in intimidation. The man had brought enforcers, stupid thugs who thought physical presence was the same as power. Arielle had been in the outer office, working on correspondence. She heard the raised voices through Minjay's door, heard the sound of furniture being moved roughly. She should have stayed put, should have called building security, should have done anything except what she did. She walked into Minjay's office. Get out, one of the enforcers said, moving toward her. Touch her and die, Minjay said, his voice dropping to something arctic. The enforcer hesitated. The room went still. This meeting is over, Minjay continued. You've wasted my time and made a threat in my place of business. Arielle, call David. Tell him we have guests who need to be escorted out. Arielle pulled out her phone, keeping her hand steady even though Minjay could see the slight tremor in her fingers. David arrived with 3 other men in under 2 minutes. The would-be business partner and his enforcers were removed with clinical efficiency. When the office was empty again, Minjay turned to Arielle. That was incredibly stupid. Probably. You could have been hurt. So could you. Arielle. Minjay ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear warring in his chest. I can handle situations like that. You can't. I didn't think. I just reacted. She finally looked shaken, the adrenaline wearing off. I heard the anger in their voices, and I thought, I don't know what I thought. Minjay crossed the space between them and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then relaxed against his chest, her hands gripping his shirt. You're okay, he murmured into her hair. You're safe. I was worried about you, she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. I know. Minjay pulled back just enough to look at her face. But Arielle, you need to understand something. In my world, caring about people is a liability. It makes you vulnerable. It gives enemies leverage. Is that why you keep everyone at arm's length? Yes. Then why did you hold on to me just now? Minjay didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had an answer, but wasn't ready to say it out loud. Arielle seemed to understand. She stepped back, putting professional distance between them again. I should go home. I'll have David drive you. That's not necessary. It is tonight. Minjay pulled out his phone. Please, let me know you got home safely. She nodded and left, and Minjay spent the rest of the night thinking about how much danger he was putting her in just by being close to him. He should have fired her, should have paid her severance and sent her away before his world could swallow her whole. Instead, 2 days later, he kissed her. It happened in his office again, late at night. They'd been reviewing security footage from the incident, making sure there were no threats they'd missed. Arielle had been leaning over his shoulder, pointing at something on the screen, when she turned and found her face inches from his. "Minjay," she whispered. He kissed her. Soft at first, questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't pull away. She kissed him back with months of pent-up longing, her hand sliding into his hair. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Minjay rested his forehead against hers. "This is a mistake." "Probably," Arielle agreed. "I'm going to hurt you. Eventually, my life will hurt you. Maybe. Or maybe we'll figure it out together." "I don't know how to do this," Minjay admitted. "I don't know how to be with someone and keep them safe from what I am." "Then we'll learn." Arielle cupped his face. "But Minjay, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "No more secrets. If we're doing this, if we're really trying, I need transparency. I need to know what I'm part of." It should have been an impossible promise. Minjay's entire existence was built on secrets and compartmentalized information. But looking at Arielle, feeling the warmth of her touch, he found himself nodding. "No more secrets," he agreed, and kissed her again. The next 6 months were the happiest of Minjay's life. They kept their relationship private from the organization, but everyone who worked closely with Minjay could see the change in him. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, seemed less like a walking storm cloud and more like an actual human being. Arielle moved into his penthouse. They created a life together in the spaces between his business obligations. Quiet mornings with coffee, late nights watching the city lights, stolen afternoons when they'd ignore work and just exist together. Minjay told her everything, about his childhood and soul, about the violence that had shaped him, about the blood debts and loyalty codes that governed his world, about the things he'd done that still haunted him. She listened without judgment, without trying to fix him or save him. She just understood. "I love you," he told her one night, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. He couldn't remember the last time he'd said them to anyone. "I love you too," Arielle replied, and Minjay believed her. They married quietly at City Hall, with just David and Arielle's best friend as witnesses. No announcement, no elaborate ceremony. Just two people choosing each other, despite everything that made that choice complicated. "Mrs. Kang," Minjay said afterward, testing out the sound of it. Arielle smiled. "That's going to take some getting used to." "We have time," Minjay assured her, and for the first time in his adult life, he actually believed in the concept of a future that held more than just survival. He should have known it couldn't last. Seo Hye-rin appeared on a Wednesday afternoon, walking into Horizon Group's offices like she owned them. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way. Designer clothes, perfect makeup, eyes that missed nothing. "Minjay," she said, her Korean accent more pronounced than his. "It's been a long time." Minjay had been in a meeting with investors. He dismissed them with a brief gesture and stood, his expression carefully neutral. "Hye-rin, what are you doing here? Is that any way to greet an old friend?" She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Or should I say, an old fiancé. Arielle had been at her desk in the outer office. Minjay saw her stiffen at the word. "That arrangement was ended years ago," Minjay said coldly. "There's nothing between us." "Isn't there?" Hye-rin pulled out a document from her expensive handbag. "Because according to the agreement your father made with mine, our marriage was meant to unite our family's interests. Breaking that agreement would have consequences. My father is dead. Those old alliances mean nothing now. They mean everything. Hyarin's smile sharpened. But we can discuss this in private, unless you want your new wife to hear about all the promises you made. Minjay's jaw clenched. Arielle, take the rest of the day off. Minjay, Arielle started. Please. His voice was softer. I'll explain everything tonight. But he didn't explain. Not really. When he came home that night, exhausted and tense, he told Arielle that Hyarin was part of an old business arrangement that he'd thought was resolved. He said she was trying to leverage the past for current gain. He promised it was nothing Arielle needed to worry about, all of which was technically true and completely insufficient. Over the next weeks, Hyarin became a constant presence. She showed up at business dinners, appeared at events Minjay attended, always with that same knowing smile, that same subtle threat hanging in the air. Minjay tried to handle it quietly, to dismantle the old agreements without involving Arielle in the ugliest parts of his past. He thought he was protecting her. He was actually losing her. You're keeping secrets, Arielle said one night, her voice flat. No, I'm handling a situation. That's the same thing. She stood in their bedroom, arms crossed. You promised me transparency, Minjay. You said no more secrets. This isn't. He stopped himself. It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. Tell me the truth. Minjay looked at her, at the woman he loved more than he'd thought it was possible to love anyone, and made the wrong choice. I can't, he said. Not yet. But I'm protecting you. I don't need protection, Arielle's voice rose. I need honesty. I need to know that when danger comes, and we both know it will, you won't shut me out because you think you're keeping me safe. Arielle, were you engaged to her, Hyarin? Was there an actual arrangement? Minjay's silence was answer enough. Did you love her? No. That, at least, was easy. It was political. I never loved her. But you made promises, agreements. Agreements my father made before I was old enough to refuse them. And you never thought to tell me about this, even after we got married? I thought it was over, Minjay said quietly. I thought I'd buried that part of my past, deep enough that it couldn't hurt us. Arielle laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's your problem, Minjay. You think you can control everything, bury the bad parts, and only show me the ones you want me to see. But that's not how this works. That's not how love works. I'm trying to keep you safe. I'd rather be in danger with the truth than safe with lies. They stood on opposite sides of the room, the space between them feeling like an unbridgeable chasm. I can't do this, Arielle said, finally, her voice breaking. I can't be with someone who thinks protecting me means hiding the truth. I can't live wondering what else you're keeping from me. Arielle, please. I'm leaving, Minjay. I need space to think. She packed a bag that night while Minjay watched, helpless. He wanted to beg her to stay, to promise he'd tell her everything, but the words stuck in his throat. Because deep down, he knew he'd make the same choices again. Keeping secrets was how he'd survived this long. Arielle left without looking back, and Minjay let her go. That was 8 months ago. Now, sitting in the hospital waiting room, Minjay realized how catastrophically he'd failed. She'd been alone through her entire pregnancy, alone and scared and probably hating him. And he'd had no idea because he'd been too proud to reach out, too convinced that giving her space was the right thing to do. Mr. Kang? Minjay's head snapped up. Dr. Chen stood in the doorway, still in her surgical scrubs. The baby? He asked, his voice rough. A girl, 6 pounds, 2 ounces. She's healthy. Strong lungs. Dr. Chen smiled. Congratulations. Minjay felt his knees weaken with relief. And Arielle? She's stable. The surgery went well. She lost more blood than we'd like, but she's going to be fine. She's asking for you. She is. She's been asking for you since she arrived. She's exhausted and emotional. But yes, she wants to see you. Dr. Chen led him to a recovery room. Arielle lay in the bed, pale and exhausted, but alive. So alive. And in her arms, wrapped in a pink blanket, was the smallest person Minjay had ever seen. "Hi," Arielle said softly. "Hi." Minjay approached slowly, afraid he was dreaming. "I didn't know." "I know." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I should have told you. I wanted to tell you. But I was angry and hurt and stubborn, and then it felt like too much time had passed, and..." She took a shaky breath. "I'm sorry." "You're sorry?" Minjay sank into the chair beside her bed. "Arielle, I'm the one who should be apologizing. I broke my promise to you. I chose secrecy over trust, and I lost you because of it. You were trying to protect me. I was trying to control the situation. There's a difference." He looked at the baby in her arms. "May I?" Arielle carefully transferred the tiny bundle to him. Minjay held his daughter with the same careful precision he applied to everything, terrified he'd somehow break her. The baby yawned, her tiny features scrunching up, and then relaxed again. She had Arielle's nose, Minjay's dark hair. "Her name is Lena," Arielle said. "Lena," Minjay repeated, the name feeling right. "She's perfect." "She is." Arielle watched him with tired eyes. "Minjay, we need to talk. About everything." "I know." He looked up from Lena. "But first, I need you to know something. I dealt with Hyerin, aggressively, permanently. The old agreements are void. I made it very clear that any attempt to leverage them would result in consequences her family couldn't afford." "When?" 2 months after you left. I should have done it immediately, but I was..." He paused. "I was lost without you, and it took me time to think clearly enough to handle it properly." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you asked for space, and I thought respecting that meant staying away completely. I see now that was another mistake." Arielle reached out and took his hand, the one not supporting Lena. "I made mistakes too. Running away instead of fighting for us. Not telling you about the baby. Thinking I could do this alone. You shouldn't have to do anything alone." Minjay squeezed her hand gently. "If you'll let me, I want to be here. For you. For Lena. I want to try again, and I promise, no more secrets. Even the ones I think are protecting you, especially those." "That's all I ever wanted," Arielle said. "The truth, all of it, even the ugly parts." "Then you'll have it." Minjay leaned forward carefully, mindful of the baby in his arms. "I love you, Arielle. I never stopped. Not for a single day. I love you too." She smiled through fresh tears. "Even when I was furious with you. Even when I was trying to convince myself I didn't. I always did." They stayed like that for a long time, connected by held hands and the small life they'd created together. Outside the window, dawn was breaking over the city, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "What happens now?" Arielle finally asked. "Now?" Minjay looked down at Lena, who had fallen asleep against his chest. "Now, I become the kind of man who deserves to be her father. The kind of man who deserves to be your husband." "That sounds like a lot of work." "It will be. But I've spent years building an empire. It's time I build something that actually matters." Over the following weeks, Minjay proved he meant those words. He stepped back from the most violent aspects of his organization, delegating to trusted lieutenants and restructuring his businesses to focus on legitimate operations. It cost him influence. It cost him respect in certain circles. He didn't care. What mattered was coming home every evening to the Brooklyn brownstone they'd bought, something with a yard and neighbors and normal problems like lawn maintenance. What mattered was watching Arielle nurse Lena in the early morning light, her face soft with love. What mattered was learning how to change diapers and warm bottles and soothe a crying baby at 3 a.m. What mattered was being present. 3 months after Lena's birth, they renewed their vows. Nothing fancy, just them, Lena, David, and Arielle's best friend in the brownstones' small backyard. Minjay spoke his promises with full understanding this time. I vow to choose truth over comfort, to trust you with my darkness instead of hiding it, to build a life where our daughter can grow up knowing her father isn't just powerful, he's good. Arielle's vows were simpler. I vow to stay, even when it's hard, even when I'm scared, because leaving doesn't solve problems, facing them together does. They exchanged new rings and kissed while Lena made gurgling sounds from David's arms, and Minjay felt something he'd never quite experienced before. Peace. That evening, after Arielle had gone to bed exhausted, Minjay stood in Lena's nursery watching her sleep. Her tiny chest rose and fell with steady breaths, her hand curled into a small fist. She was so vulnerable, so dependent, so completely trusting that the world would keep her safe. And Minjay understood, finally, what power really meant. It wasn't control or fear or the ability to make things happen through force. Real power was this: the choice to be gentle when you could be harsh, the choice to build instead of destroy, the choice to love openly even when it made you vulnerable. Real power was standing in a nursery at midnight, watching your daughter sleep, and knowing that this tiny person had completely unmade and remade you into someone better. I'll spend the rest of my life earning this, Minjay whispered to Lena. I promise you that. She sighed in her sleep, and Minjay smiled. Tomorrow he had meetings, problems to solve, business to conduct. The criminal element of his world didn't disappear just because he'd chosen a different path. There would still be threats and complications and situations that required his particular skills. But now, he had a reason to make sure he always came home. Now, he had everything. If you enjoyed this story of love, redemption, and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe for more compelling narratives. Drop a comment below and let me know what you thought about Minjay and Arielle's journey, and what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember that the strongest empires aren't built on power, but on the courage to choose love over fear.